Let's talk about selling in the DMs without being a total sleazeball. And I know a lot of people are scared of getting into this because in order to have a conversation with a stranger and get them onto a call to sell your high ticket course or coaching or service, whatever it is that you have to kind of go into these awkward situations. And today I'm going to help you. I'm going to give you a DM script and kind of show you how you can avoid that awkwardness or coming across as the sleazy random dude that messages you on LinkedIn and starts asking you very personal questions. Like, none of us want to be that. So I'm going to break it down for you. I'm going to make it a lot easier. And we're going to go through kind of a 5-step process. These are more like 5 things that I think that you need to do to be successful selling in the DMs without being weird and actually creating relationships with people and building a pipeline that you can use to sell into your programs for years to come. This is something that, I built my entire agency on. It wasn't talked about as like selling in the DMs back when I started doing this in 2013, but I've always had conversations with people in Messenger on Facebook or in the DMs on LinkedIn or other different places, and just to find out about them and to eventually move them onto the call and sell them into my services. And I've made millions of dollars doing this. And I think more importantly, I've helped people at my agency make 6 figures per month and beyond by having these sales conversations, whether it's from organic content, reaching out to people, or like we do at our agency, using Facebook ads to create conversations, which is one of the most effective, high profit, scalable ways to sell your courses in coaching with Facebook ads. And so I mentioned earlier about kind of the sleazeball people reaching out to you. And I actually had this recently. I pulled it up here on Facebook Messenger. I'm not going to show you, but I had this guy reach out to me. And I guess we were friends on Facebook. I'm friends with a lot of people on Facebook. And he's just like, hey, I'm going through my friends and noticed that we've never actually spoken to each other, which probably isn't a bad line if I knew who the heck he was, if we had like met in groups or a mastermind or some event or something like that, but he didn't. And then he goes immediately and says, I want to reach out to you privately to introduce myself and see what I can do to help you with your health and fitness goals. Now, first off, I could probably use a coach and slim down a little bit. I'm aware of that. But this is not the way that you want to start a conversation. And so I'm going to go with you and talk to you about how you can actually engage a conversation, not like this, because I know as soon as I saw this, I'm in the industry, so I'm like, okay, this dude's trying to sell me. But I think anybody, even if you weren't in the industry, would be like, what is up with this guy? Why is he asking me about my relationship or my, business, how profitable it is or how it's doing, like my health and fitness? Like, these are personal questions. And if you're in a space where you're helping people with relationships or their health or their business, these are 3 of the most common spaces that we see coaching around. You have to be able to have those conversations, but you need to do it in a way that doesn't cause people to throw their guards up and put up a wall where they won't talk to you. You need to disengage them and get them to have conversations, which leads me to the very first thing, which is we want to create inbound conversations. It's always way easier to sell to somebody in the DMs if they're reaching out to you. And there's a couple of ways to do that. The first is through content, and the second is through paid advertising. So if you are creating content, like we call it 2-step content, where you say, hey, I've got this great guide on how to sell in the DMs. If you want it, comment below with DMs, and then a bunch of people respond to your post on Facebook and write DM, and now they've raised their hand and said, I want that guide. Now they've given you permission to reach out to them. They've reached out to you and initiated that. And it's really easy for you to transition and be like, yeah, here, I got this thing for you. Tell me a little bit more about your business. And now the conversation started, and you have permission to ask those personal questions without it throwing the guard up. And you can turn those into phone calls where you can sell your program. So that's the first way. Another way is you can do, and this is what we do at my agency, is we'll use paid traffic. So we will promote something. It might be a video training, a lead magnet, like a PDF lead magnet ebook kind of thing. Or it might just say, hey, we've got this community like we do with our community for course creators. And you can check that out here in the description. We might run an ad and say, hey, we've got this group for people just like you that want to achieve blah, 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 blah. And they are going to click on that ad. enter their name, email, and phone number to get an invite to that community. And when we do, because they're new followers, they're new group members, we're going to reach out to them and see how we can help them. But because they raised their hand and said, I want that thing, that gave us permission to start the conversation. Now, I think it's pretty obvious why having those inbound leads is going to be a lot easier than trying to reach out to some random stranger that you don't know and ending up looking like my friend on Messenger here. But how do you get those conversations to happen, especially if you don't have an audience or a following yet? So the key here is the second point. You need to create magnetic content. And what I mean by that is you need to create content that attracts your ideal prospect, that they're really going to want. And the only way that you can do this is if you know their pains and problems and desires inside out. And one of the best ways to do that is to have conversations with people. So the very act of doing this exercise and having those sales conversations inside of the DMs is going to help you become more aware of what's really driving your ideal prospects, so a way you can be more effective. But as a starting place, I just want you to grab a yellow pad or something like this, and I want you to write down 5 to 10. I would say the more the better, because as you start to write down a few, you have to think harder and dig deeper to really find more problems. So I would say aim for 10 problems or frustrations that your ideal client is dealing with on a day-to-day basis. Write it down on a yellow pad like this. I've got a couple that I put together for my ideal clients, and I'll share them with you so you can get an idea. So somebody who's trying to create an online course and grow that course business, they're going to have frustrations around inconsistent sales. Maybe they're making, they make 10K one week and then they make, or 1 month, and then they make 2K the next month, right? That can be, the ups and downs can be really frustrating. Even just not making enough money is going to be a huge frustration for them. And knowing that, I'm able to create content around that, and I'm able to connect with them better, so that way they trust me because I'm able to provide solutions for those problems and frustrations and help them have a breakthrough. So inconsistent sales is going to be one. Not having enough leads for their program, having bad leads, having the wrong leads, like people that are coming in but maybe they're not their ideal client. Like, that's a big problem in my industry. Not having an audience or a following to sell to, and like, how do you start making money when you don't have that audience? That's a big one. And then two kind of sides of the coin that we see a lot is the hustling all the time with not much to show for it. Like, you're not making enough money for how hard you're working. Or the situation of you're making good money, but you're hustling so hard, like you have no time for anything else, and you're not getting that leverage that led you to want to start a course business to begin with, right? So those are some of the common frustrations and problems that I see in my industry. And I want you to write those down. And then you want to start creating your magnet content, which I'm going to recommend is video content. And you just want to start taking those frustrations one at a time. You want to talk about specific questions that your ideal prospects ask, and you want to deal with the specific problems that they deal with, and try and teach whatever it is that you do that helps them overcome those problems. And you want to create this content, one, because as you create it and you post it places, like you can post it on YouTube, you can post it on Instagram Reels, on your Facebook profile, on LinkedIn, wherever you feel like your ideal audience is going to be. You're going to post that content, and eventually people are going to find it and they're going to start commenting. And when they're commenting, that's going to provide you opportunities to start conversations, which we're going to talk about in the next section as I start breaking down a script for you. But it's also going to allow you to create two steps. Like, if you know these pain points and you're just putting content out for people to engage with, and then every now and then you put together something deeper, whether it's like a bigger training video with some slides or some sort of PDF checklist or worksheet or something that's really going to help people, you can do that two-step thing I mentioned, where it's like, hey, I've got this training on how to sell in the DMs. If you want it, comment below. And now you're creating those inbound leads. These same things can be used for using paid traffic. If you're going to run a Facebook ad for that thing that you would use as a two-step, you can get people to opt in, and then you can start the conversation in Facebook Messenger or via SMS text messaging once they opt in. Now, the other reason that this magnet content is so important is the third step to being successful selling in the DMs, and that's you need to lead with value. All right, when you go and have a conversation, you can't just start probing people with different questions. Like, you're going to do that, but it becomes a whole lot easier. You're able to grease the wheel, so to speak, and get them onto a call much easier if you have something to give them. And by creating this content around their problems, you, by the end of your conversation, are going to be able to have a resource that's very good, that's going to help that person, that you can give them to create some reciprocity so that they're more likely to show up on the call. So let's get into how these conversations actually work. And this is where you're going to want to get your notepad and start taking some notes, because I'm going to give you the script and everything. But I want to explain the goal to you first. So when we start a conversation with somebody, our number one goal when we're trying to lead with value is we're trying to figure out what is the biggest problem that they need to overcome. That way we can give them a resource. That way we can give them a piece of content, whether it's a video training or a blog post or whatever it is that we have that's going to help them solve the problem. And this is important for two reasons. Number one, we need to discover the problem in order to get them onto the call. If we don't discover the problem, then we have no reason to say, hey, I think I might be able to help you. Do you want to hop on and chat? And that's essential, right? The other reason is because we want to lead with value. We want to create that reciprocity. And so we want to build trust as quickly as possible. And when they know that we're asking them questions because we're trying to give them something, and then we find out what the problem is and we can hand them that resource, we immediately create trust. So they're more likely to hop on that call. So here's how it looks like in practice. Let's say that somebody comes on and they're trying to join my Facebook group for fitness people, okay? The first thing that I want to do is I want to thank them for joining the group, or thank them if you're not using a group, for their interest in whatever it is that you're giving them. And then I want to basically ask a question that is going to start the conversation. And it's really important that you use an open-ended question, because people are more likely to respond to open-ended questions, especially if there's this promise of something that they're going to get. So here's what it might look like in practice. I'm going to say something like, hey, Mike here from Fastlane Fitness. Thank you so much for joining the blah, 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 blah group. I'd like to find out a little bit more about you so I can point you to some helpful resources that we have for our members. How much weight do you need to lose? And that right there is my opening line. And I've done a couple of things, right? I've let them know, one, so excited you're here. Welcome to the community, or, thank you for your interest in this resource. I'm about to send it over. But then also, I want to find out more about you, and I want to help you, right? And so this is the difference between being that sleazy, like out of nowhere question, asking how much weight you want to lose, versus somebody that's saying like, hey, I'm here to help. I want to send you some things, right? It totally shifts the dynamic because you're there to help them. Now, once they respond to that, or whatever other question you have, right? Like, let's say in the course business, I might ask them, straight up like, hey, what's your course about? And this question, if I ask that, the reason I like to ask that question is because it not only helps me find out about their offer, but it helps me figure out if they're actually my ideal prospect or not, right? So if they say, oh, I don't have a course yet, well, I can't really help them grow and scale and market a course if they don't have one yet. But that will let me know if they're actually, if they're not the ideal prospect, it's okay. I can still send them some things to help them along, so that way they can eventually become a prospect down the line. That kind of gets into your nurture pipeline. But you got to ask your question. They're going to respond. Now, once they respond to that initial question, you're in business, the conversation started, and your goal now is to figure out like, what's the biggest problem or obstacle that they're running into? So in this case, if they're trying to lose weight and they get back to you and say, hey, I want to lose 30 pounds, you want to figure out like, why do they want to lose 30 pounds and what's prevented them from getting there? And getting to the bottom of that, asking whatever questions you have to add. This part, there's not like a set, like these are the questions you need to ask. It's very industry specific. You just want to have a natural conversation with them, like act like you're with one of your buddies, sitting at a table, like a bar top like this, drinking a beer, ask them questions. Like if your buddy told you like, oh, I'm trying to lose 30 pounds, you'd be like, oh, cool. Like what have you tried? What's worked, what hasn't worked, right? That way you could help them. And that's the frame that you want to take here, is like, you're the buddy talking over a beer or a glass of wine, whatever it is, and ask them questions to figure out like, what do they need help with? And eventually you're going to get down to that big problem, that big frustration that they're having, or that obstacle that's helping them get to the ultimate goal. And once you're there, you simply want to say something like, sweet, I understand now. I actually have a resource that I think will be super helpful for you. What's the best email that I can use to send it to? This is really important because one, it's going to give you a way to send the resource to them in a delayed manner so that way it doesn't stop the conversation. But collecting that email is actually going to make it easier to get them onto the call. Because what's going to happen right now is they just think, hey, they're going to send me something that's going to help me, and they're going to give you their best email. And then you're going to be able to say, great, I'm going to send that over to you here in a little while. And then here's the next part. You want to say something along the lines of, this training is really helpful at helping you achieve XYZ, whatever it is that they told you earlier in the conversation that they want to achieve. But it's not a magic bullet. So I'm going to send it to you, but I would love, if you're cool with it, to hop on a call for a little bit and talk about your goals and some of the things that my clients have done to achieve XYZ. And so the idea here is we're basically saying, like, we're going to send you this resource. It's really great, but let's chat, because you have a personal situation and there's a lot more that goes into this than just that one strategy to quit snacking after 8 p.m. or something like that, whatever it is that you're sending them, okay? And then hopefully at that point, if they're this far along in the conversation, they're usually going to agree, right? 3 out of 4 times they're going to be like, yeah, let's do it. And as soon as that happens, what you want to do is you just want to keep the appointment as soon as possible, next day preferably. And you want to give them 2 options. You want to give them a morning option, evening option. So you can say something like, hey, I've got time tomorrow at 9 a.m. I've got time at 2 p.m. Which of those works best? And now they have to choose, or they're going to say, oh, I can't do one of those, but I'm available here. If you just say something like, hey, are you available tomorrow afternoon? They're going to be like, oh, they can say yes or no, right? And they'll be like, no, I got blah, 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 blah. It's different than if you give them those choices, okay? So that's going to be really important. But here's what's happening here. As you're talking about this and finding the right time, as soon as they say it, you already have the email. And so now you're going to put it in your schedule once, your Calendly, whatever it is that you use to book appointments, and it's going to send them the automated email. And so then you're going to say to them, hey, do me a favor. I already had your email. Check it. Make sure that you got the appointment confirmation. Blah. Okay. Do that. They're going to say, yeah, I got it. Now we've confirmed that appointment. We know that they're getting that those reminders, and you've kind of locked it in, right? Like, this is another part of that trust building process. But did you see how easy it was? Because we already had that email. So once you've done that, you got the appointment, the next thing that you want to do is you want to keep the conversation going. You want to do a little bit more rapport building before you bounce. And this is really important because part of the sleazy salesperson problem is that most people, once they get the thing they want, they disappear. And then it's very obvious, like, oh, he got me booked on a call. That's all he cares about. You don't want to do that, because whether this person closes on the phone or not, you want to nurture this relationship and be able to have this person in your pipeline, because maybe they don't sell today, maybe they don't need you today, but maybe they buy from you 6 months from now. And that only happens if you build that relationship. So what you want to do is, one, once the conversation's over, you actually want to send the original resource to that email that you said you were going to send over. It's also going to help you confirm that appointment and get them excited about it, because you can tell them a little bit about it. But in the meantime, they're in the conversation. Just be like, hey, I am so excited to talk to you and get to know you a little bit better. Is there anything else that you would want to talk about on this call? This is an opportunity for them to bring up more problems or frustrations, or maybe goals that they're not sure how to get there. And so let them tell you a couple of different things. Maybe you have some other resources and you're able to send them more than one resource when you send that email. But the important thing is you have a little bit of conversation before you bounce. So that way it feels natural, and then you're meeting them the next day. All right, now that you know how to have those conversations in the DMs, get people onto the calls, there's 2 more things I want to talk about. I had those 5 things I had today. So the 4th one is you have to engage with the comments that are on your content inside of the DMs. And this seems to me like really just common sense. Like, you have to talk to people. But what happens is, like, let's say you post a piece of content on an Instagram reel or something like that. Most people, when somebody comments and they're like, oh, Sally, I love your stuff, all your content, it's so helpful, it changed my life, blah, 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 blah. You're going to say something like, thanks, Joe. I'm glad you like it so much. And you're going to leave it at that. But what you should be doing is you should be clicking on that person's name and checking out their profile, looking them up on Facebook, doing a little stalking, figure out who they are, what they're about, and whether they're a good ideal prospect for you. And if they're not, you can go ahead and just, leave it in the comments. But if they are, you need to DM them and try and start the conversation. So here's how I would go about that. One, you've already done the stalking, the Facebook stalking or whatever it is, to find out a little bit about them. And so now you want to DM them and you just want to say something, the same kind of thing, like, hey, thank you so much, Joe, for liking my content and leaving that comment. I'm glad that you like it so much. Now, that person, they're going to respond. People rarely respond to the comments, but if you take the time to DM them, especially if you can add any kind of personal touch, they're going to respond because they're going to be like, oh my gosh, Sally, who I follow and I love, actually reached out to me, took the time to send me a DM. This is awesome. Right? So you're going to get a high response rate from this. And once they do, and they're like, oh, you're welcome. I just love everything about you. You're so amazing. Now what you want to do is you want to kind of like put the awkwardness out there. At least this is how I like to do it. And so I would say something along the lines of like, hey, Joe, yeah, I did a little Facebook stalking. I see that you're a mindset coach. That's awesome. How long have you been in business? Here's what's happened. Number one, you have now told this person, like, I took the time to find out who you are as one of my followers and find out a little bit about you, and you've started the conversation. So I've gone to this person and said, like, oh, you're a mindset coach. I can help you grow your business. And now I'm going to start asking those questions. How long have you been in business? Which might lead to, they've been in it for 6 months or they've been in it for 6 years. Like, how's it going? Like, where do they want to be? What's preventing them from getting there, right? You can start to ask those personal questions and then convert them onto a call. Now, the fifth and final thing, and this is so important because no one does this, is you need to create a nurture pipeline. You need to find a way, even if it's a simple spreadsheet, to keep track of all these conversations you're having and follow up with people over time. That includes the people that get on calls or that maybe they schedule a call with you and don't show up, and the people that you had a conversation and then they ghosted you at some point. Like, you want, if you've had any kind of conversation with people, you want to follow up with them long term. When you have new relevant content, you want to send it for them to check them out. You want to get them into your Facebook group. You just want to check in and see how they're doing. If they told you that they had a goal to go from making $2,000 a month to $5,000 per month in the next 3 months or so, check in on them, see how that's going. This makes such a big impact because most people don't do this, and it's not overly complicated. You just set aside time in your calendar. One of the things that I like to do is that if I want to follow up with somebody, I just go on my computer and I go on my calendar and I set an all-day event and I say, follow up with so-and-so about such and such, or send them a resource about X, Y, and Z, and then I set a date 2 weeks, 4 weeks in the future. And so then when my calendar pops up for that day, way down the road, I've totally forgotten about the conversation by then, but now I have a reminder. I go and I reach out to that person, and now they're like, holy crap, this dude really cares about me. He like wants to help me, which I do. I want to help everybody, right? We're trying to lead with value. But the great thing about this is that no one's doing it. And so over time, you build even more trust. And eventually, when they're ready to work with somebody to solve their problem, you're going to be the only person that they want to work with. All right. So start building a nurture pipeline. Now, if you've made it this far and this has been helpful for you and you want to know more about our Course Growth Accelerator program and how we can help you to build your course sales and really start to scale and automate some of the process, then I want you to go into the description and schedule a call with somebody on my team. We'd love to talk to you, find out what your goals are, what's holding you back, and see if we can actually help you get there. And if you're not ready to make that kind of jump yet, that's cool too. Check out my free group, $1 Million Course Secrets. The link is inside of not the DMs, the description. You can join. It's totally free, and you can actually talk to me there, ask me questions there, and who knows, maybe those will turn into a new YouTube video, or maybe I'll respond to you directly inside the group, which I do every single day.